Been lots of talk in the international news of late about exchange rates. The pound sterling performing unusually badly against the euro and the US dollar. What sort of impact has that had for holidaymakers from the British Isles looking to go perhaps to European countries especially?
I think it's had a major impact, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. So the traveller, Isle of Man travellers, always resilient, always looking to travel. And I think they're just being a bit more savvy in relation to the type of holiday that they purchase. So if they want to go back into the traditional sort of Portugal, Spain sort of destinations, they're choosing perhaps more the all-inclusive, which means that they've got a budget, they pay for the holiday, and they haven't got an awful lot to spend while they're actually away. So it's a bit more controllable. But obviously people are looking at other areas. So you've got Tunisia, Morocco, particularly Turkey. The Turkish currency has been devalued against the pound even now, and represents great value. So that's seeing a resurgence in bookings. But certainly there are opportunities out there where the traveller can still get good value by staying away perhaps from some of the usual holiday destinations.
So you think people's plans, are changing rather than they're choosing not to go abroad? Is that?
Well, I think there are a number of people that aren't travelling this year in the same way that they were. I think what we're seeing is that the same number of travellers are certainly travelling potentially from the islands, whether it's Jersey, Guernsey or the Isle of Man, but also it's the value of the transaction. So same number of transactions, but the actual value of the holiday they're purchasing is perhaps slightly lower than what it was this year and the year before.
Thinking of it from an inverse perspective, you could argue, I suppose, it makes the British Isles a more attractive place for people to come.
Well, I think the staycation that we discussed is certainly there, and obviously is adding value. But also the pound being very weak, it means that obviously overseas visitors coming into the UK, which might have a positive impact on the Isle of Man, is certainly there. And certainly within the travel blogs that I'm reading, there is a large number of visitors coming into the UK this year from overseas because of that weakness in the pound.
If people do choose a staycation rather than going to Europe, perhaps, does that impact travel agent companies?
I think not. Well, yes, it will impact the travel agents, and I think certainly travel agents on the high street will be having quite a difficult time. I think it impacts the tour operator more than perhaps the travel agent, and niche tour operators particularly, where they're going to a certain destination and that market suddenly turns against them, and they've got nowhere else to turn to an extent. So they've got all their eggs in one basket, and we have seen a spate of niche tour operators failing to an extent. And then we saw last week a very old, established, large UK tour operator in the name of Superbreak that successfully put on flights to Iceland in March this year. And were very, very successful. I went on myself. And so successful that, in fact, they put on more flights for 2020. And they collapsed last week. Obviously, they're covered by the CAA, they're covered by ABTA, so people's money is protected. But of course, it's an indication as to what's actually happening in the sector. And there is an inherent weakness at the moment, and they might not be the last.
So is this, well, obvious question maybe, is this of concern to local companies as a theme?
I think if you look at the high street in general across the retail sector, I think Brexit, nobody really knew how Brexit would roll out. I'm still not too sure that anybody really has a full understanding as to how it will roll out. But what is actually creating is a lack of confidence. Certainly Isle of Man residents, a lot of businesses here are linked to the UK. So the UK is being hit particularly hard. The high street has been hit particularly hard for the last few years. And again, I don't see that really going away anytime soon. And Brexit will roll out the way that it is. Is it going to have a further impact on the pound? It might do. Will that create less confidence on the high street? Probably yes. So I think we should all be thinking about probably the next 6 months as being quite tough.
There are all sorts of eventualities that could come out of Brexit, of course, which is the elephant in the room really for all sorts of industries. And is there a best case scenario or a worst case scenario perhaps in your eyes for holidaymakers and for travel agents and
Well,
tour operators?
I think the good news is that really the traveller has already been sorted out. So that deal has already been done. So we know exactly what's going to happen from a passport point of view, from a customs point of view. So I've always kept saying that airplanes will keep flying, hotels will still be open, ground transportation will get you to where you want to be. So the holiday is not going away anytime soon. The bigger picture, crikey, crystal balls and all that sort of stuff, and it's a very complex one. I'm certainly not educated or have any real answers as to how that's going to roll out.
And me neither. But one thing you touched upon just before, lots of economists are saying the exchange rates are only going to continue along the same sort of trajectory, at least in the immediate term. So are we likely to see holidaymakers next summer perhaps finding their pound goes less far again, do you think?
It might very well be the case, and as a business, we're saying to ourselves, the next 6 months, as we run into Brexit, and then as we run out, whatever Brexit turns out to be, are going to be extremely difficult. And I think that's across the whole retail sector. No matter what business you're in, that's going to be a tough situation. It might be sort of spring next year before we start to see really any indication as to where it's all going to end up. But what I can say is that in 37 years of being in the travel industry, we've seen many airlines come and go. We've seen many tour operators come and go. The island traveller is very, very resilient, and because we live on an island, they'll always want to travel. And I don't think this will be any different this time around.